And we are ready to go to get on with the first match of the day and of Group B. And just in case you're not aware, we will be playing Group B out to its conclusion today to get the final two players to join tomorrow to effectively make another group. We know we like our groups in a competitive gaming, and we're going to have another one tomorrow, which is going to be deciding who finishes first, second, third, so on. But I'm excited to kick this one off, Sol, because it is going to be, your boy Casie versus Felkeine. And what do you make of this? Because just looking at this, Casie does have the rogue that you like. I'm a little bit surprised, and maybe you can fill me in here. Casie isn't bringing combo Demon Hunter, and I feel like that's a Casie deck, like stylistically speaking.
I can fill you in on this. Casie very firmly believes that OTK Demon Hunter is a bait and that people just like playing it because they feel smarter when they're playing it, but it's not actually a better deck.
He knows my secrets.
Yeah. I believe he refers to it as intellectual Demon Hunter because people just sort of play it to get a full sense of superiority about themselves. But he said to me earlier, why just save up and do all your damage in one turn where you can just deal damage every turn of the game and win that way anyway?
Because that's the fun way to do it, Casie. That's
yeah,
it's all coming out now. But he does have that rogue and the no hands warrior, which honestly, this deck is, or this archetype roughly in terms of, say Pain Warrior, as I think we both agree is a decent name for the rough damaging package,
sure.
is only going to go up in my opinion. Already we're seeing newer versions. I think top level players enjoy playing it because of its complexity and also enjoy trying to decipher and work out what the list is actually going to look like in the end.
Yeah, you, I believe, sent me a screenshot of you managing to get a frothing OTK with Hunter Ace's version of the deck, which has got me immediately interested in playing it. Something else I'm very interested in is seeing Felkeine's first lineup as a newly minted Grandmaster, and so hopefully we can take a look at that. And as if by magic, Felkeine running Zoo, which I think is the big talking point for him. But as I mentioned earlier, I do have a few questions about some of the ways he's just built his deck together in the minutiae of it. For example, he only has one Corsair cache in his Warrior, which I find very strange. He only has one Satire Overseer in his Demon Hunter, which I find a little bit strange as well. So just the individual way he's built the decks, I have some questions with, but I have no real problems with the archetype that he's brought. Even though Zoo over Galakron Warlock does seem like a big question mark to some people, I would imagine.
Do you know what I like as a theme, if you just take that picture in your mind, is the Zoo is 16 1-drops, the Warrior is 15 2-drops, and then the rest of the deck just curves into nothingness. So it's just pretty funny that the deck seems to be very heavy on certain mana slots. We can see the bans now, and Casey's Warlock is banned, which is the Galakron version, not the Zoo that you were just talking about, which is Felkeine's, and the Druid being banned out from Felkeine means that he is not going to be playing the spell/token Druid, whichever way you want to call that deck. So I'm very interested, and as I feel is often the case and maybe going to continue all weekend, it's always the fourth deck, right? Because we have to question now, the Rogue versus the Zoo is the question for me. They both have Warrior, they both have Demon Hunter, so it really is, can one of those two decks really get an edge and really get that win? And honestly, we've talked about the Zoo before. Oh, perfect. We've talked about the Zoo before, and for me, I definitely appreciate people like Gallen's opinions on this list as we get into game number one, but I feel like it's a little bit too cute. I feel like Stone Tusk Boar in there, Shield Bearer maybe, but there's no Flame Imp for me, so on. I feel like there's something inherently wrong when you're not playing a Flame Imp in a Zoo deck.
I can definitely sympathize with that. I think so. I like this list. When I saw Gallen post that he was having big success with it, I did try it out myself. Didn't get that many games in with it, but I think I went undefeated in my first 10 games with it or something. So I do enjoy it. But I think part of the problem people are having is that it doesn't really play like a conventional Zoo, where you just play cards every turn and curve out and buff. A lot of it is kind of saving up for and executing combos, and because you have hand buff elements as well, you're kind of incentivized to keep cards in hand sometimes. So it is kind of a markedly different playstyle from kind of a traditional Zoo list, which I think is where some people might be getting stuck, where, Flame Imp is just a play it on curve and jam it out card. Whereas if you're going to hold all your 1-drops, make them massive and rush them into things anyway, regardless of how many stats they start with, doing the damage to yourself in a Demon Hunter meta starts to become a little bit less appealing.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, even the combos you talked about, you have to kind of save up to do something altogether. It's not a straightforward combo like, Leroy Power Overwhelming Faceless, is it? Do you know what I mean? Like, the combos are still very difficult to actually make work. There's the Imprisoned Scrap Imp, which was definitely, for me, one of the dark horses of the expansion. I honestly barely gave this card a second glance.
Mm-hmm.
But it seemed like... I think I realized its effect when it started coming off, say, Galakron Warlock, or, being generated randomly, and then I'm like, oh no. Why are all their cards so big now? What's just happened? And then I kind of, really clicked for the power. But speaking of another, honestly, a little bit under the radar card, but one I think is very cool to play with, is on Casey's side of the board, which is Terran Gorefiend. The things you can do with this card and how you do it is pretty intense, I think, and pretty in-depth.
Yeah, and he ate his Injured Tolvir with that as it came down last time, which is huge. It's another reason why Injured Tolvir is so good in this deck. Not only that it starts out damaged, so it's an automatic activator for all of your pain cards, as we're now borrowing from Mr. Brian Kibler, but then is resummoned. It's huge potentially out of that Gorefiend instead.
Yeah, and look at this. It is just the layers of combos and the multitude of combos this No Hands Warrior can take. It is insane, and why it feels so, I think, satisfying when you play it well, right?
Felkeine face check, number 1. Doing well. Enjoying it.
I've not, unfortunately, because I've been out of the game a little bit, not had the pleasure of casting Felkeine before. So already I'm having fun, Sol. I'm just going to tell you right now, I'm already having fun. In the meantime, though, Casie has a lot of options, definitely got a lot of pirates, and whenever you have Risky Skipper in hand, the deck can do stuff, right? So at any moment, Casie can go off. He really is just missing the Battle Rage, really, isn't he, to say this game is going to end very soon.
Yep. Battle Rage would straight up end it right now, I think. But you can see, boom, out of the Terran Gorefiend comes a 3/7 Injured Tolvir. That's that interaction I was talking about. It comes down damaged as a 2/3, as a 2-drop, but then when it revives out of the Terran, it comes back as a 2/6, then buffed +1/+1 by the Terran. So it's a huge swing turn on the board.
In the meantime, though, the Scrap Imp has gone off, and although you can't see it on screen quite yet, all those minions are pretty big right now. Gaining a +2/+2 buff means, yes, the 1-drops are a bit bigger, but those magic carpets, they're going to take some damage to actually bring down if and when Felkeine decides to commit them to the board.
Yep. Again, Casie has multiple layers of board, which is the first thing you really want to try and generate with this deck. He has the Serpent Egg, obviously, which has an egg in it, which has the Serpent in it, but he also has his Terran Gorefiend, which has, again, another 2/3 and another 3/7 inside of it. So there is going to have to be some miracles on Felkeine's side if he's hoping to punch through all of that. Oh!
And there it is.
What did I say? What did I say, Raven? Is the game over?
I think so, yeah. I think when there's... Oh, my lord. Okay, so honestly, with very little exaggeration, Casie could pretty much draw his deck right now.
Are the police being summoned this turn, Raven? Is this legal or not? I'm
look
unclear.
at it. Just look at it. And now the problem is... It's not only literally lethal with the Battle Rage. Wow.
Never doubt a word I say. Battle Rage ends the game.
I think I said that
quite
first.
Literally ended the game.
I will say though as well, I'll finish my point I was trying to get to before Felkeine very rudely ended the game. But it's not only, like, in a lot of decks, if you draw cards, it's good because you have stuff to do, right? That's just base logic. But in this deck specifically, if you Battle Rage for that many cards and can effectively draw most of your deck, all the cards synergize together. It's not like you've just drawn 7 good singular cards. The fact you've drawn 7 cards in that deck means you've drawn just the ultimate power, which is why you saw the concede. Honestly, it may have looked like, well, why did you concede that early? He wasn't dead, technically. And it's like, no, like, Casey's whole deck works together and will just kill him and win. And there's nothing he can do about it. And that's the power of the deck there. It's a pretty crazy game, actually.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird 2-phase deck in some regards, where you sort of play tempo early on. Sometimes if you get ahead, you just push that initiative. But later in the game, you have the option to just divert to a combo deck, essentially, you know, with all these big Bloodsworn, Kor'kron Elite style combos that you can do, or just huge board generation combos that you can do with some of the stuff that Casie just had at his disposal in the early game. So it's a very, very flexible deck in terms of what playstyle you want to run with it, which honestly is why we're all struggling so much to come up with like a consistent name for the deck, right? Because
or a consistent list, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think for me as well, that's the trickiest part of my understanding of that deck is, okay, so you get a Tolve, so you play it on 2, right? It just makes sense. It activates a few things that you mentioned earlier on. But when do you actually, knowing when the point is to bail out of that and go like save up for combo or try and get off saving up for a big battle rage, that's very difficult because the second you overstep and go too aggressive and then they wipe your board and you're looking at 2 cards in hand and neither of them are battle rage, we probably lose. And I think that is so difficult. But I believe the next matchup is going to be a Demon Hunter Mirror, and we can take a look at one of the lists here and check it out and look a little bit more in depth. Let's have a look.
Yes, this is going to be Casey's Demon Hunter, who is playing the aggro version. You see their keycard Frenzied Felwing, which I absolutely believe is a keycard in its current form at 3/3. Seen a lot of debate recently about whether the announced nerf of just -1 health, essentially making it into a 3/2, is going to be a big enough deal to change it. I certainly think it will have an impact, just because of the way it lines up now versus so many removal cards in the meta. You know, Immolation Aura, for example, if you're just looking at Demon Hunter Mirrors, but also just Priest AoE, you know, Holy Nova and Breath, so many things that can be used to essentially kill every minion in Demon Hunter's deck, fall short of killing that Felwing right now, which is why I think it is such a key card. So it'll be interesting to see how things will progress forward, and that Immolation Aura interaction might be relevant because I believe we are going to go into a Demon Hunter mirror here, going up against Felkeine, although I believe Felkeine is also, Felkaine's also just on the aggro version, so never mind. No AoE is going to be at disposal here, but you know, there's still things like Hero Power plus Twin Slice and other sources of 2 damage that can efficiently deal with opposing minions.
Honestly, a lot of the minions deal 2 damage as well, right? You know, the Battle Mage, even the tokens from the Satyrs, there's even just minions in the game in general, not just in Demon Hunter. It's a lot easier to like play a 2/3 early on instead of, you know, a 3/3 or a 3 attack minion in general. So even not just purely spell removal or anything like that, even just being able to trade into it a bit easier is going to be very interesting going forward. But that's for another week because the nerfs are not live yet. And we're kicking off game number 2. Casie on the top, currently leading 1-0 over Felkeine in the first match of Group B. Felkeine on the bottom, also playing Demon Hunter, getting off to his Battle Mage start, but very quickly with this Twin Slice is going to be answered. But he also has an answer for his own with these I-Beams.
Yeah, I think there was a decision to be made there. In typical Casie fashion, Casie made it in half a second. Because by using his Twin Slices there to try and consolidate the 3/2 on the board, he's slowing down his Satyr Overseer a little bit in terms of being able to attack immediately when that card comes down to generate 2/2s. Obviously, just playing out the Battle Fiend versus a 2/2 without clearing did feel terrible in that spot, so I can definitely get down with the play that he made.
I had to just check myself for just a second there, Sol, because I was like, Casey's won 500 games of Demon Hunter? And then, because of his portrait, and I realized they're playing on super accounts, right? So never mind. Why is no one else using that portrait?
I know,
GM,
Casie just sees the lines. Casie is using his super account to its fullest abilities right now. No one else has figured this out.
If I was Felkeine, I would be legitimately intimidated right now because that portrait is badass. Like, honestly, it's so cool. But anyway, there's a bit of a pushing back and forward with these weapons early on, but these double I-Beams basically being active one after another for Felkeine, although might not look fantastic at this moment in time, having 2 basically spot removals for almost anything Casey's going to play and heal is going to be pretty nice for Felkeine in the near future.
Yeah, and crucially, his curve looks really nice as well. If he can get the I-Beams and the Furious, whatever that card's called. What is that card called? Felwing.
Oh, sorry.
Furious
I thought you said Frenzied, sorry. Furious...
those out of his hand over the coming turns, which I think is what this is about right now, right? Very inefficient I-beam usage, but he just goes ahead and uses it. Then he just curves Warglaives into Skull of Gul'dan directly from the left-hand side of his hand. Very, very nice outcast curve, the way he has it built up right now.
Yeah, interesting actually, because I was looking at a slightly different turn last turn and using the hero power to get the Fel Fin and the Fel Wing active and not I-beam. It would have left, you kind of ignore one of the minions, but still, I think that maybe would have been pretty good. But looking at this now, the way it's panned out, can't really argue too much with Felkeine here as he gets the 2 Felfins on board, and as you said quite rightly, sets up, if not a Skull of Gul'dan next turn, if he draws Twin Slice, but even one very soon.
Yes. If he draws Slice, as you said, he'll probably just play that from the right. Otherwise, he has I-beam Warglaive set up for just a decent swing turn that can consolidate him for a Skull of Gul'dan on turn 7 instead.
And now at this point, Casie doesn't actually have an answer to this Felfin, which means he's just going to go for making as wide a board as possible and just say, well, okay, you probably just trade the Felfin into the Satyr, but I still have a 3-2 and a 2-2 you have to deal with, right? And that's just going to have to be good enough. Both players are working towards this Skull of Gul'dan, but Casey's hand is just a little bit more clogged than Felkeine's is. Do you take the Force on? Oh, okay, he's going to I-beam. Sure.
He's got to I-beam.
Yeah,
he wants
that
to
makes
I-beam
sense.
anyway.
Sense,
yeah, he wants to I-beam this turn anyway to unlock Skull for next turn. So.
And this is where, the Demon Hunter mechanic kicks in, because realistically, in a normal game of Hearthstone, you would go, well, I could just trade here with my weapon and save the I-beam, maybe. But it didn't just remove the minion and save your face damage, right? As you said, it activates the Skull next turn, which is much, much better, which is why the plays from Demon Hunter don't always look like a straightforward Hearthstone turn.
Oh. Is it ever better? I'm slowly learning that not playing Skull when it's outcasted is illegal, but man, the other turn looks good this turn.
I think if that was any other minion, I'd say no. But honestly, in this spot, I think I would have played Adept Me. Because it's so much damage, and honestly, it means Casie can't Skull himself, right?
Sure.
Because he dies most of the time, right?
I think the argument is that off your Skull, you're going to, draw a board that you still really can't Skull against, I think you are still supposed to Skull, but man, it's so tempting when, your alternative turn is that good. I
think I would have, purely because it's getting nerfed soon. I would have been like, take this 7 attack.
Sure.
And now this is it, right? And this is one of the ways the matchup can go, especially when it is the tempo mirror, where you just aggressively fight for the board, because outside of, I-beams, Demon Hunter doesn't actually remove minions that well without their own board. It's something that I found a lot of success with in the early days of the expansion. I was playing Highlander Hunter, but with a very early aggressive curve, is if you push Demon Hunter off the board and they're playing this kind of list, they actually kind of struggle to get back on.
Yeah, they need Altruist, right? That's basically their only way out from that point.
Okay, so you're going to be able to swing in, lock in this Metamorphosis, and kill off the Cain for a nice 1 mana and a watermelon, as Derek likes to call it.
Yeah, no, that was Derek that pointed that out. I will fully give him credit, but I am definitely going to call it a watermelon from now on, because he's so wrong. Look at that, watermelon to the face.
I'll be honest, all the demonic powers in the world, as Felkeine takes the game to even up 1-1, I still would not like to have a watermelon thrown at my head. Right, that's going to hurt. That's going to do 5 damage to me, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, Felkeine evens it up. And this series, after a bit of a quick one, isn't it? I know Casey's not the slowest player in the world, but Felkeine seems to not be really messing about on his end either.
No, he has very much seemed kind of in the Casie mold from the tournaments where I have got to cast him so far. He, at least is a player that can, get sucked in and feel comfortable by Casey's speed of play, right? So I would expect him to match him on that front, as he is matching him in game score right now, picking up a win in the mirror match. I guess have to eat humble pie a little bit. I called out some little bit of concerns with his Demon Hunter list, but then in the Demon Hunter mirror, he was able to pick up the win there, but still small sample sizes and so on. But Felkeine is on the board and still has a couple of decks left to win with his Warlock and Warrior.
Yeah, and quite honestly, the Demon Hunter mirror there that we did just cast, it was fairly straightforward, right? There was no like mind-blowing plays. It's just Felkeine managed to keep hold of the board just for that one turn. And in a lot of aggro matchups that are minion-based, once you keep hold of that board, you normally stick it and end up winning the game. That is the win condition in matchups like that.
Yeah, I think most importantly, he had a smoother outcast curve than Casie did.
Right.
He could dump the left-hand side of his hand much more efficiently, and then was then able to skull pretty much on curve. I think he was one turn late, whereas you could see Casie on the top still had a Warglaves and a couple of other cards, I think, in between the left-hand side of his hand and the skull to be able to pop off himself. So Felkeine was always kind of a turn ahead in that game.
Yeah, and you can't afford to be a turn behind against a Demon Hunter of any form anyway. But anyway, let's check out one of the other lists that the players are bringing here as we move on through this series. Just a reminder, this is best of 5. It's the first match of Group B, if you're just joining us. And we're going to check out Felkeine's Warlock. This already taking a loss so far today, as he has played it in game number 1, but he's going to be giving it another go. And again, we did touch on this a little bit earlier, but for me, it's just a little bit too fancy. Maybe it has to be because of the way the deck and the archetype is built, but it pains me not to see a certain few minions in there. Like just the steadfast Zoo minions. You know what I mean? This feels much more like a kind of weird combo deck than Zoo, to be completely honest.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that, except my takeaway from it is kind of the opposite conclusion. I think as long as you get out of the Zoo mindset when you play this deck, I think it's really, really fun and also very powerful. But you are right, it is kind of a weird mid-gamey, long-gamey combo deck, as more so than it is just a curve out 1, 2, 3, 4 kill you with Leroy or Doomguard kind of thing that old-fashioned Zoos were. So I personally like the deck a lot, but I would still put a huge question mark next to whether it's a better bring than Galakron Warlock right now, which is perhaps the strongest deck in the game, average win rate considered, perhaps even above Demon Hunter right now in sort of high legend meta, for example.
And there's one thing to bear in mind as well is, like we said before, these players have had to play through a Swiss bracket as well as, the group phase, which is this weekend. And I always give respect to players who maybe Felkeine's gone, well, everyone's going to bring Galakron Warlock. So everyone's ready to deal with Galakron Warlock or ban it. What if I bring something else and then just throw someone's plan off? Because if you're playing Swiss, maybe you can get a win by just bringing a slightly different lineup and just throwing off the maybe expected plan from your opponent.
So here we go. It's going to be Demon Hunter coming up against this Zoo. And I think it would probably go without saying if you have some knowledge as to the makeup of this Demon Hunter deck, but the one really big go-to card is Altruis in this matchup for the Demon Hunter. That is absolutely what you live and die for on a lot of occasions.
Yep, and on this side, Felkeine not running the old Zephyrus sack pack, but he's still running Sacrificial Pact in this Zoo, and he's going to have the ultimate answer to the Battle Fiend on turn 1 from Casie. So I think, honestly, when Battle Fiend comes down turn 1 and your opponent Sacrificial Pacts it, it's like, okay, we've both tried to be a bit sneaky. Let's just play a fair game now.
It's backstab. Rogue backstabbed him, it seems pretty reasonable in that spot. It's not like back when the lists were a bit greedier and you were getting like Priestess of Fury sack packed, for example. Like, that felt miserable.
Yeah. It just feels like, you both tried to maybe draw an extra card or something at the start of the game. You both caught each other doing it and like, okay, let's just play a fair game now. Let's go.
Right.
But here we go. So
I will say, sorry, that Stone Tusk Boar off the top from Felkeine while we were just talking about the Battlefiend interaction was huge, because otherwise he didn't have any way to kill the Satyr Overseer in hand, so that thing would have just started generating extra 2/2s every turn, which if Casie was to get that far ahead on board that early against Zoo might spell disaster. The Stone Tusk Boar pickup was actually pretty huge.
And just looking at this hand from Felkeine, as I believe most people won't be overly familiar with this deck, what is the Crazed Alchemist really for? Is it just because stuff ends up with a lot of health, so you trade and swap it, or try and go for burst damage? Is there a specific combo in mind? Because there's a lot of good cards in the game right now, and Crazed Alchemist doesn't strike me as one of the best.
Yes, I agree. This is a card that I did cut from Gallen's list myself because I did not see the massive applications of it. But your assessment is correct. And essentially, you have minions, you're playing Beaming Sidekick, your minions are getting hand buffed anyway, you have Magic Carpet, which is massively skewed towards health. On top of that as well, so being able to use it for a massive amount of burst damage is very, very nice. And still, sometimes, because your goal is, or because you end up slightly behind on board in a lot of games and end up having to clear with Magic Carpets, it can be useful to do that to the opponent if they have the reverse. If you can flip a high health minion to a low health minion and then rush a 1-drop into it to clear it out, that can be very useful as well.
Okay, so just for now, just a fairly flexible card to get you out of some sticky situations. And speaking of sticky situations, Casie's shaking the head just then as the second Sacrificial Pact was played from Felkeine to kill off the Frenzied Felwing, I believe.
Yep.
Which means that Felkeine again on a fairly decent health total, and Casie is definitely... He's definitely on the receiving end of trying to get something done this game now because he was making great strides, but Felkeine is pretty much put a stop to it, especially when we can see the Magic Carpet plus X in his hand.
Yeah, this double I-beam is a lot of clearing power this turn, though. He's actually going to use it to isolate the 7/6, as opposed to kill the 7/6 off with a couple of minions in the attack as well, which I guess makes sense.
It's that old mentality, right, of honestly a lot of zoo matchups of history where one big minion's cool, but having multiple attacks to aim is actually better, because if Felkeine feels pressured, well, his big minion can only attack once, right? It can only hit another single minion, so everything else is kind of semi-protected by leaving just the one big guy up.
And here you can see exactly what this deck is intended to do. He got the Scrap Imp to hand buff a little bit. He got the combination of discarding the Hand of Gul'dan with his Expired Merchant, which is a guarantee if those two cards are in your hand, because Hand of Gul'dan is the most expensive card. And then you start to see the Magic Carpet coming into play to fight back against the board, and just look at the size of the board that he's been able to generate.
It's honestly kind of pops up out of nowhere, doesn't it? Which I think, again, a timing is a big question here of when to do this as the Warlock. And just a note for anyone who's not used to this deck often draws its whole deck every game. It's pretty consistent, as you mentioned, because of the Hand of Gul'dan means that you are just cycling draw time and time and time again. So it's not like, oh, Felkaine's discarded it twice, it's lucky. It's like, well, no, that's literally what the deck does.
And if you're Casie, how do you even start coming up with a plan to get out of this? Is the answer face? Are you somehow trying to address this board state? I mean, the 7/6 probably has to go first and foremost, right? There's 15 on board. Like, you're just dead to Soulfire if you don't kill that 7/6.
Yeah, I was trying to discover a way that Metamorphosis could be played this turn. And maybe not even used, but just played, so the ability would be saved, and still survive in a reasonable fashion. My worry now is this just too slow from Casie? Did Casie just have to risk it because technically there was not lethal on board? And did he just have to go all face, Metamorphosis face, and then go again next turn and hope for the best?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, he's dead to, like, every card in the deck, essentially, at that point. But
Agree, yeah.
But yeah, maybe.
It's just,
long story
it's
short,
not like Felkaine's running out of cards, right? You're not going to be able to trade forever, so...
Yeah. Just to continue to go down the path of how this deck is supposed to work, because we still haven't really seen it get a good draw in GM so far. I think Tom on the APAC broadcast kind of suffered with some suboptimal ones. You see there, once you pop off the Hand of Gul'dan combo once, your merchant then has more Hands of Gul'dan inside it, so you can then kill that at a time of your choosing to put more Hands of Gul'dan in your hand and then start discarding those again with your other discard effects. So that is how the deck is supposed to function, and I'm very thankful for Felkeine for giving us a demonstration, because I feel like that deck was getting a bit of a bad rap up until this point.
It definitely was. And also I just want to point out the deck, and as we've talked about a lot actually, the archetype overall is a little bit new, So it's not like these players have probably had... It's not like, oh, you just play it like Zoo, because then you'd see some pretty high-level play even if the cards were new, because the Zoo playstyle is almost ingrained into anyone who's been playing Hearthstone for a long time, especially competitively. But this is a little bit different, and as you quite mentioned, as soon as you start stacking those cards, then Soulfire becomes a fairly likely out if like then discarding it again because you have more in your hand, so it's more likely to hit. So we actually even saw Felkeine do the discards in arguably like the correct order, even though the game ended a little bit too early to see the Soulfires. But yeah, I do agree, it's kind of cool to see the deck work, because I think when I first saw it, I think because we were in a call practicing with Derek as well, but when I first saw it I was like, well, this deck just looks like a silly deck. It just looks like like pro players have gone, oh, this will be funny. You know what I mean? And that's it. Whereas the more I see it and then, maybe perform a little bit better, maybe the deck has got more legs than I'm giving it credit for.
And again, even in that call, like, I don't know if you remember, but just about every turn, either you or Derek could be like, right, so we play this, right? I'm like, no, you life tap. You just need to make your hand bigger. Like, you don't... Playing a minion as a 0-4 or a 1-2 or whatever just doesn't achieve anything in that deck. You have to build the combo and save up and pop off to do powerful things.
Yeah, pretty impressive so far. Felkeine is going to be 2-1 up with only needing one more win on this Warrior to take the series and move on to the upper side of his group. And just to mention as well, Felkeine, Zim, 2 new Grandmasters to Europe. They've not only made it through the Swiss stage, Zim's waiting to play tomorrow now in the final group. And if Felkeine takes a win here, he's on a fantastic first step to join his fellow countrymen in tomorrow's final day, which means, the 2 new Grandmasters for Europe have got off to the best start that they could want, which is very, very impressive and, puts a good foot forward, right, for their first week.
Yeah, and I think it's looking pretty good for Felkeine, even more than just being 2-1 up in scoreline might reflect. I'm not entirely sure how the Rogue matchup is, because this No Hands Warrior was not a deck when I was jamming my 100+ games of Rogue. That was very early on, sort of like day 2, day 3 of the expansion, maybe. But the Warrior, of course, one of the big reasons why it did come to fruition was because of the matchups that it has against the Demon Hunter decks.
Let's get into it. And I was going to ask you a question, and now my question has completely changed. So hold on to your seat, Sottle. First, imagine that Vile Fiend was X card, right? The second one. Imagine it was just, I don't know, any other card almost, right?
Okay.
Would you still coin the first one out if you didn't have the second one? Because this is another thing, you're using coin, you're using, early on in the deck that I feel like benefits quite a lot from coin. You've got Risky Skipper, but there's not a lot of card draw. Is it something you always want to coin out on one, do you think, against a deck like Demon Hunter? Or is there any merit to save it?
I think even if my follow-up afterwards was just a 1-drop, I might consider doing it. But even then, that gets complicated because 1-drops are extremely valuable commodities in this deck because of the combination. They either are Risky Skipper or have very good synergy with Risky Skipper, right? So it's a tough question for sure, but I think just because of the way the dormant nature works, I do think you want to get it down as early as possible in most situations. Because
I definitely, there's a lot of talk of, I think you mentioned, ball control, coining out best turn in the game or whatever, right?
Sure. Yeah,
but I don't think in this deck specifically is that simple based on what your starting hand can look like.
Okay.
But it's going to work out pretty well, and don't get me wrong, if you're ever going to do it against a tempo Demon Hunter, I will have no real complaints, because guess what? They're probably going to play some minions.
Whoa. 4 to the face. Of course, very relevant to keep that minion as a 3-2 as opposed to a 3-1, since Demon Hunter always has access to such a cheap source of 1 damage.
Well, so funnily enough, the Lackey actually is not half bad here for Felkeine. Giving a minion rush means that he does have, a kind of from-hand damage burst going on here. And also now, there is still the Rampage that you could add onto this Vile Fiend, or even just jam straight away on Tolvir to put a reasonably sized wall in the way of Casie, who is pretty much just out for blood this game. He is playing quick and dealing damage quick.
Yep. Tough turn, though, right now. It's a lot of damage to be taken just to keep on hitting minions like this. And it looks like Kobold Lackey is the perfect pickup in this spot. If he didn't find that Lackey solution, like exactly what he would want to rush into this 4-2 is kind of questionable, I would imagine.
If he rushes in and instead just plays Tolvir Rampage? Is that too crazy? Because because it can't
you
be
want to
hit.
make the trade? Oh, I see. No, that's a real play, actually. Yeah, I haven't thought
Because the
about that.
Tolve
That
is in the
definitely
way
has
of the
merit.
Demon Hunter hero power, right? And
Yes,
so,
yeah, that's a good point.
And that's a pretty big boy when he's rampaged.
I think that actually has a lot of merit. I did not spot that play. You're absolutely right.
And also, the side benefit, you get to keep a Kobold Lackey for next turn, right? Which probably kills another Demon Hunter minion.
Yep.
Yeah, I like this a lot. This is very tough for the average Demon Hunter to get through. But speaking of getting through taunts, there is Mr. Sunfury.
Sorry, Felkeine braced himself for the Skull of Gul'dan to come out. Then when it didn't, his face lit up. He jigged about in his chair for a little bit. Then he rubbed his belly. What?
He's like, Demon Hunter for breakfast.
Apparently, yeah. I'm not entirely sure what that gesture was supposed to mean, but okay.
I'm honestly surprised that, I think soon we're going to start seeing players have actual, driving belts on their chairs to really buckle in for the Skull of Gul'dan, but would actually just pull the belt, buckle in, and be like, right, I'm ready. Let's go. Ooh. Well, playing extra risky skippers in your deck is pretty cool, I think.
Yeah, but right now, Felkeine has played his only payoff card for Risky Skipper in the Rampage. That was kind of all he had going for him. He doesn't have Armorsmith, he doesn't have Bloodsworn Mercenary, and most importantly, he doesn't have Battle Rage. So this time, you see Felkeine brace, and then a huge wince come out as the Skull of Gul'dan does actually come down.
I will say, though, even Bomb Wrangler, Armorsmith, Battle Rage, as you mentioned, that's a few cards. He could get it soon enough.
Yeah, for sure.
The game isn't over. But it's close.
I wonder now whether he needs to just start thinking about a straight-up race as an out for himself as well. Just not worry about sending, use a Risky Skipper to not trade damage into these 1/1s and just be able to push face as hard as possible. Because that way still leaves damaged minions in play and sets you up for a Battle Rage top deck if you find it, right?
Maybe even going crazy, it might be too much, but even Goblin Lackey, Risky Corcron, I guess that wouldn't be worse because you'd lose it. It's only 1 damage.
Yeah, and then also the thought is that you have Corcron in a Rage Bloodsworn Mercenary combo as an out as well for burst damage lethal, but I do kind of like getting the 4-3 down now. Like I said, I think setting up some kind of race scenario is the way to go in this position.
I think what I was trying to do is spend the mana effectively, and as you say about racing, Felkaine's just jamming this in a Rage, which I do like, but it was hurting me that he couldn't armor up as well, right? It was just a little bit awkward to get the turn off.
Agreed.
Now, though, a very cheap Warglaive of Azinoth, which means that Casie, again, has the hard question. How often does he spam trades, which he could do? He can use the Glaive-bound Adept to kill off the Terran Gorefiend if he wants, or he could isolate it instead and just go face, which I think is what he's going to do.
Yeah. I think going face is smart. I think killing the Corcron there is important, because if Bloodsworn Mercenary is still drawn, that Corcron still represents extra damage if you leave it on board, right? Because the Bloodsworn can still copy it and get charge damage. So taking it, killing it that turn represents more damage off the board than it immediately looks like based on certain draws. From that point onwards, I think, face damage is just the way.
Yep, Felkeine not looking too happy, but honestly, there's a few lackeys that could do him a favour here. Oh, we got Titanic. It's a pretty big deal. So trade and then just taunt something up. It's got to be better than the armor, right?
Part of what you said, I don't want to trade. I'm so upset.
But what's in the Gorefiend? What's in the Terran? I honestly can't recall now.
There is. Okay, I was just mousing over it as he blew it up.
I think that's okay.
Yeah, it seems fine. He still sets up lethal for the following turn anyway, which is the important thing. So yeah, it seems reasonable.
Working out whether he wants to commit the Goblin Lackey. I wouldn't hate it, honestly. It's not like his hands full and he needs to spend the mana either way, right?
Oof. Oof. Oof.
Oh.
Biggest oof.
Kane. Chaos Strike. More demon damage to the noggin. Whatever you need to do, Casey's done it. He drew the canes, skips through the taunts without a care in the world, and Casie has evened up this series 2-2. It's all to play for in game number 3.
It is, and Casie, for now at least, is backing up some of his words from earlier, because in case you guys didn't see it, I put out a tweet earlier, just asking for opinions from Twitter about what to call this deck, because now it's kind of evolving past what No Hands Gamer had originally come up with. I feel like we need a more general name for it. And Casie replied and said, just call it like Trash Warrior with no good matchups or something like that. So far, so good. Yeah,
that's true. Just wait till the challenges become more common, and then Huntrace has something to say about that, right? But yeah, it's very interesting, because that's when the deck does look terrible, and there are plenty of games, especially when players just pick that deck up for the first time, that will look like that, because sometimes you just don't really know what to do. You don't get off to a good start, and this is where I just recommend, if you ever see a Battle Rage in your opening hand, keep it no matter what, because it really does just unlock huge chunks of your deck. Whereas you just imagine if Felkeine had some more cards, had some card draw, the game could look very different. He was one Armorsmith away from getting close to stabilizing there. If he just got it at that moment, he did play the risky skipper.
Oh yeah, I think because Casie was just so kind of hard committed to a race, because that's just kind of where he was with his hand. I think if Armorsmith was drawn with one of those risky skippers, like absolutely insane. It would have blown out the game completely. Felkeine himself was only one turn off getting lethal himself, pretty much. So yeah, huge.
And I will say as well, Casie, at least from the looks of it today, looks like the no-nonsense form of Casie, where he's just down to win. He's very serious. He's obviously, he's playing fast as usual, but, Casie is as, as kind of jokey as anyone, really, when he wants to be, but definitely watching him now, he's just like, I'm going to kill you with my decks, and then we're going to move on to the next match. Done. And there's no messing about. It's kind of scary, honestly.
It is, but it's now, I believe, going to come down to Casey's Rogue as the last deck that he has left to win with. Again, this is a list that I am very, very, very excited to see, because it's probably the deck that I've put the most games into in this expansion so far. Casie is actually a little bit deeper into the stealth package than I was, where he has 2 Spy Mistress alongside the Sky the Tears, which are essentially just activators for Greyheart Sage in this deck. That's the only payoff card you're playing for them, just to draw extra cards. The fact you can then draw extra cards means that your deck is more consistent, and so you can cut, for example, one Devoted Maniac, which is a bad card. It's a really bad card, but it's a card that you have to play in Galakrond Rogue, because you need to be able to consistently get your 4 activations for Galakrond. If you just draw more cards instead, suddenly you can consistently get those activations from elsewhere and cut one of the bad cards from the deck and still make room for other things.
Yeah, and I will say as well that Rogue is one of the more fortunate classes of Galakrond, where you do not necessarily have to have the full invocation, like the invokes, for it to be good, right? There are some, look at Warlock, it's significantly better with the 4. Look at Warrior, significantly better, because you draw so many more cards, the weapon you want in that Warrior archetype anyway, and so on. But for Rogue, just drawing the 2 is still 2 0-mana cards pretty good a lot of the time, and often enough, especially in this Rogue deck.
Not sure I followed you, Raven. It sounds like you described 3 scenarios where you could draw twice as much or not, and then said one was fine and one wasn't, which I'm very confused about. But we'll move on.
You know what I meant. No, one day I had. That's all I had, one day. And now we're back to normal, so back to the old days of casting together.
The good old days, Raven.
But I do like the Spy Mistress just straight away for Casie. He's just getting something down of... he's going to be able to activate the... what's the 3-drop called again?
Greyheart Sage.
That's it, yeah. I'll confess, I have not played tons of Stealth Rogue or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, this is, as good an opening as he could want, apart from actually having the Sage.
Yeah, for sure. Felkeine, on the other hand, slightly awkward hand in that he's drawn every weapon in his deck, which means Corsair Cache is now completely dead if he draws it. Though Silver Lining, as mentioned earlier, Felkeine for some reason is only playing a single copy of Corsair Cache, which I do find very strange.
Add in an Arcanite Reaper, Felkeine, that's the next step. Imagine that. You're playing this sick combo deck, you're like, well, sometimes you just want to get them for 10. You're like, well, okay. Does have access to Armorsmith, but none of that card draw, just not... I say that card draw. Battle Rage is still not there. He's going to equip the Ankar and does have some game, but if you have no Battle Rage and no Risky Skipper, your options with this deck are quite limited in my experience.
I think Felkeine will be very relieved to see Casie whiff a turn here, though, because that is of massive importance. It was a super aggressive opener. The fact that Felkeine had a 3-weapon hand and Casie had the opener with what's this card called, Frozen Shadow Weaver to lock out the start was huge for him.
Oh, is Felkeine going to go off now? Ooh, okay.
He has to, right? So much damage represented on board.
Yeah, I didn't know whether he was going to go a slightly different way and try and go for like a big Armor Smith next turn, along with the Risky Skipper to get some health back. Therefore, the damage he takes this turn is recovered anyway. I mean, I don't mind this, don't get me wrong, but it's just now, if he loses this board, then his Armor Smith is very meek.
There's the bad card. Not the worst thing in the world here, though, because there are the 1-attack minions in play.
How much do you think Casie wants to commit to clearing this board? Are we going to see backstabs?
So many options.
I wonder whether you would Pharaoh Cap before... Yeah, Pharaoh Cap before the Devoted Maniac, because your Reborn option might be a stronger play for you this turn than the Devoted Maniac.
And it soaks a bomb anyway, who cares? Like, I think you're okay with it soaking bomb attacks, or bomb damage, should I say?
I think that one was pretty close. Does just go ahead and backstab the bomb. Interesting.
Felkeine confused there by the backstab, but I think Casie just wants to reduce as much down as possible.
Well, if he was going to backstab that turn, doesn't he just want to backstab first and take the damage on the face and then play his minions afterwards?
I guess maybe Casie thought, oh, what about Armor Smith? It's an extra, like, you know, an extra attack for Armor Smith or something like that. I don't know.
Saying like the play was just an afterthought.
Maybe, yeah. Because it's not like, or maybe he thinks because of the way his hand looks right now, he's going to be taking some damage because nothing he has is going to be that great of a turn. He probably wants to play Krunks this turn. So maybe he values keeping his health a little bit higher so he can soak the like free turn of damage he's going to give Felkeine.
I guess if you really want to dig into it, he gave himself a chance to remove a damaged minion from the board, which then plays around Blood Boil Brute to an extent. But personally, I think I would have still taken the damage on the face.
He's going to play Krunks and just get hold of this Galakrond.
Yep.
Which, to just reiterate my point from earlier, you are allowed to play when it's not fully buffed in Rogue.
You are, but this is still phase 1 right now. He's only on draw
this
1,
is too early, yeah.
So not a particularly powerful effect as it stands. I think mostly this is because it's a 6/6 and it's threatening lethal, essentially, right? That's what Felkeine has to be scared of at this moment.
But Felkeine has plenty of options here, actually, especially with that Rampage. Means that he could not only gain a ton of armor, but he could actually just push forward an even bigger threat with this egg if he really wanted to.
Sure.
And I'm personally, I don't know about you, Sol, or how much you've played of this, but I'm a pretty big fan of like rampaging when you can. Like, just play it and get it out there, as long as it's not a complete throwaway.
Yeah, I think there's some logic to that, just because it is a very situational card. So therefore, if you encounter the situation where it's good, then it's probably a decent idea just to get the most out of it. There are some matchups where I think it can be a very useful combo piece, but like the Korkron Bloodsworn combo, for example.
Oh, 100%. I mean, if you've got any thought of being able to combo, then sure. But I think in matchups like this, where it feels quite close, if you can just play it without, having a terrible turn because of it, just chuck it down. I mean, look how good this egg is now.
Is it cold
Agreed.
in the shadows?
So another... I had to remind myself, even though I do play this card. Another Shadow Weave, I thought it was, being played there for Casie, freezing down the egg. Means that it's not going to get its effect of, well, you have to trade into it, but then there's a Serpent coming out of it. And now Felkeine is in a bit of a rough spot and will need this Lackey to do something pretty reasonable, I think.
Yeah, he is, and he has used both skippers up until this point. It was a point I was going to make when you were kind of debating his... did he want to wait with the risky skipper to cash out the Armor Smith? During that time, he had Ankar equipped, so he was always going to draw that second risky skipper to be able to pair with the Armor Smith. But now he's kind of past that point of safety with the deck, where he's basically used all of his best resources, and now Casie is just still ramping up the pressure here with a Galakron for draw 2. This is shade. This is absolute ultimate Galakron PM. When you play it for 2 and it draws you 2 invokes, that is the biggest slap in the face.
But honestly, it's why Galakron Rogue was powerful before the expansion rotation anyway, and why it's still relatively powerful is whether you Galakron first or say Togwaggle first and Wand, all it compacts onto each other, right? Because the cards you draw in are then going to just cement the game even more, which is back to my point of drawing 2 isn't fantastic, but it's by no means terrible, because then look, suddenly there's just the taunt, there's everything away, you draw through your deck to make your future draws better, so it really does just compound and make everything a lot nicer. But Felkeine, with the draw of the Bloodsworn Mercenary, has made 2 rather large eggs. They must be like ostrich eggs or something now, because those are meant to be pretty big.
Casie, by the way, playing 0 saps in his version of Rogue, which is something that differs from the list that I was playing, again, a week ago at that point, which I think sap made more sense back then, because, for example, Demon Hunters were still playing Imprisoned Antiek at that point, for example, to which sap was an extremely good answer. So, in this regard, when the Demon Hunters are much lower curve, I think sap is definitely a card you can be punished much harder for playing, but you can still see that in some instances, sap is just a card that functions in a way that basically nothing else in the game can compete with as a removal tool.
Yeah, and I'm going to do a usual funky comparison here, but just look how often Kane just snipes games. And it's because it's not quite the same, but you effectively get to sap taunts, right? So it's just what?
Okay, I mean,
but I just mean the setup, for example. Just it's not the same. Like I said, it was a funky comparison, okay? But if Casey's going to push for lethal, similar to how he sort of looked a little bit earlier on, being able to just, although it's been buffed and it's the true power of sap, but being able to just also say, well, there's one taunt in the way and just get rid of it is a pretty huge deal too.
Well, so the reason I'm objecting to you using that example in this scenario is that Casie isn't really pushing for lethal, it's just that there's a freaking 8-9 egg in play that he can't deal with. So, Kane would do nothing here, whereas sap would actually kill
Kane would
minion,
hit someone in the face, okay, so...
Okay, sure.
That is not nothing. But yeah, he is now digging, he's in trouble, and just, like you said, out of nowhere, that Bloodsworn Mercenary is potentially just saved the day for Felkeine here.
Yeah.
Or at least gave him a chance, because it was not looking good early on. Oh, if only. Shadow Step, let's go.
Casie looks to his left, which I'm assuming, or sorry, to his right, which I'm assuming shows his deck tracker, because he just did the same thing that I did, and checked deck tracker for how many duplicates he has left in his deck, because he has the card Shadow Step in hand that he could have used to bounce that Zephyrus back, but chose not to do so.
There is 14 damage here, so something else has to be done for Casie.
Does not find the taunt.
So 1 off, which isn't going to work out because of the Goblin Lackey, unless I've miscounted Mr. Sottle. Oh, I have. I thought the weapon was buffed. Sorry, 2 off.
Yep, he has 12 in total. So
Apologies.
He now has 13 in total with the Goblin Lackey.
Yep. I thought the Livewire Lance was a 3 attack, as it often is.
And he now has 14 in total. No, he doesn't.
No, he
doesn't have
can't. You
board
can't play
space.
it.
Ooh. No way to buff one minion and then kill that minion to make space for the buff on another one? Nope.
Honestly, I think he just goes all face and plays the Bomb Wrangler. Believe.
There's 5, 8, 9, 10, 11 coming back at him the other way.
No cards for Casie, though. Like, is he really... And then Leroy, not in the game anymore.
Sure.
Oh, I don't... Is he that much of a threat? Am I undervaluing Casey's board here? Because Felkeine's not got card draw either. So they're both kind of just working with what they've got here.
Yeah, but
and I'm wondering if this
guess
is too much respect.
Felkeine would present the argument here that if you're both out of cards and one of you has a board and the other one doesn't, which one of you is going to win the game?
I guess, yeah. I'm just too aggressive, Saul. I'm just like, go face, put him to 1.
Eviscerate Kobold Lackey Raven. GG, you lost this game.
Would he have lost?
I think so, yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, whatever, I lost. It's only 1 game in itself. And that's why these guys are there, and I'm here. Look at Felkeine.
A cruel fate awaits you in the ashes.
The agony.
Oh. Okay.
No.
Well, that's kind of good, even though it's not necessarily setting up lethal or anything, but it's good to just
it
reduce
is
down the board.
A big boy, yeah, indeed.
And also, it's potentially lethal, right?
Yep. Smart play, trades first to reduce the total targets on board, and then goes face for 1.
Well, okay. I need someone to do fancy maths, yeah?
Uh-huh.
I wondered if trading the 1-1 into the Kobold first and then bomb, like how much
need
better it
to-
would have been. Because you have to hit more, but it's a higher chance to hit face, right?
Yeah, you have to hit for 3, though, so you have a 50-50 as opposed to a 1 in 3 for anything not... Yeah, maybe that was better, actually.
Yeah, like, I ain't doing the maths, I'll be honest. I'm not doing the maths on stream. I probably won't do the maths after the stream either. Just being honest with you guys listening. But congratulations to Felkeine, and you can see he is in. You know, he's in this match, right? He is, like I say, it's the first time I've really gotten the chance to cast him. And it means a lot to him. And this is match 1 of his group. If he lost this, he wouldn't be out. You know, he'd still be in. But, the intensity in which he wants to win that match is very impressive. And, that series as a whole was extremely close to kick off the day, Sol. I don't know about you, but I'm tired already because many games went down to the wire there between these 2 players.
You wanna take a nap? I can just solo cast the next one if you want. I'll give you a little wake up call.
Tempting, but no, it's okay. I don't really want to miss any games, to be honest.
But yeah, honestly, Felkeine he's like that in every series he plays. I've never sat and watched him play ladder, but I imagine he's like that in every ladder game that he plays as well. He just seems very animated and very, I don't know, emotionally invested in Hearthstone, I guess. I did have the pleasure of hanging out with him a little bit at the Grandmasters Summit. Got to record a few pieces of content with him as well that hopefully you guys will get to see later on in the season. He is a really, really entertaining guy to be around. So I'm thinking he is going to gather a large fan base by the end of this first GM season.
I just imagine if he acts like that when he's like playing a casual game against his like 4-year-old nephew or something, and he's like, "Go, you got lethal, come on!" But yeah, let's check out the bracket and see how it looks after match number 1 of the day. And just to give you a refresher of what the bracket looks like in general, Felkeine taking down Casie means he is in the winners portion, and it does mean Casie is down into the lower side of the bracket, which means if he loses against the loser of Yala and Silvername, which will be coming up next, means he is out. And although he has gained a good set of points for this week, he will not be gaining any of those extra points from getting even higher up in that bracket. But yeah, it's looking good for Felkeine, and again, the Frenchman just seem to be getting the job done, Sol.
Yep. Can't argue with it. If you want to know who's going to win a game of Hearthstone right now, bet on the Frenchman is not the worst rule, it seems like. But after that electric pace opener, even though it went the distance in game score, it was 2 players playing very, very quickly on both sides. We do now have Yala coming up in our next series, who I think is likely to grind things to a halt a little bit because he is a very, very slow and considered player, and he is playing some very intricate decks alongside that, which I'm sure he will be thinking through many, many, many decisions per turn during his time allotted.
So what you tell me, Sot, in a very roundabout way, is get comfortable. This one's going to take a while.
I think
great.
If this series goes 3-0, it will still be longer than that series.
Oh, really? Someone time it. I'm not going to, but someone should, just to see if Sol's right or wrong. Hopefully wrong. But anyway, I'm not sure if we are getting into this or if we're going to go to a break before we start. Let me just have a quick check. It looks like we are going to be getting